NBA Fantasy Basketball Sleepers and Breakout Players to Draft. Starting with the most obvious tier. Brandon Miller, Charlotte Hornets. Despite playing on a very bad Charlotte Hornets team with very little help, Miller was still able to average a very respectable stat line last year, giving his owners 17.3 points per game along with 3 triples, 4.3 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.1 steal, and 0.6 blocks per game. Overall, pretty well-rounded stats for a rookie that was overshadowed by the hype of Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, and Scoot Henderson last year. But in most standard category leagues, Miller actually finished as a legit top 120 fantasy player. With the likes of Miller building off a strong rookie season and LaMelo Ball likely playing more than 22 games this year, this probably means more help and more opportunities for open shots to bump up his offensive numbers. So overall, Miller seems to be in a good spot to put up new career highs across the board. Also, there doesn't seem to be a major threat in Charlotte to steal his minutes in the rotation anytime soon. So if everything pans out for Brandon Miller, then I could see him have a decent breakout year and maybe average closer to around 20 to 21 points, 5 rebounds, over 1 steal, and around 1 block and 3.2 triples per game, giving him a pretty good shot to finish as a top 60 to 70 fantasy player next season. Josh Giddey, Chicago Bulls. Fantasy-wise, Josh Giddey took a small step backwards last year. We saw a decline in his minutes, scoring, assists, rebounds from a promising sophomore season the year before. And some of that may have been a result of his off-court issues along with the emergence of Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams in the Thunder rotation. But fast forward to this season, we might see a huge comeback year for Giddey. Him forcing his way out of OKC and landing into a much better fantasy situation in Chicago should really stack the deck in his favor. In Chicago, Giddey is stepping back into a massive starting role with an increase in minutes usage and more touches with the ball. So to keep it real, there's a legit chance that we see him put up similar numbers to what he did in OKC back in 2022 and 23, where he averaged 16.6 points along with 7.9 rebounds, 6.2 assists, and almost 1 steal per game, which was good enough to make him a top 100 to 110 player in most standard leagues. But better yet, at 22 years old right now, he's likely just entering his prime. So I think this might be the year where some of the fantasy owners can be a little bit more bullish on Giddey, as he has a legit shot to best his 2022-23 stats back when he was still a pretty raw 20-year-old. So if Giddey can seize this new opportunity in Chicago and take that next step forward, then I wouldn't be surprised to see him become a top 80 or top 90 fantasy player, also making him one of the best bounce back / sleepers to draft with a mid to later pick. Scoot Henderson, Portland Trail Blazers. Besides Wemba, Scoot was one of the more hyped rookies to enter the league last year. And fantasy-wise, he got off to a pretty rough start, but slowly got better as the season went on. Henderson ended off his rookie year pretty strong, averaging 18.3 points along with 7.5 assists and 1.4 steals in his final month. Heading into this year, it looks like Scoot is going to be the featured guard in Portland once again. Being in a great fantasy situation, there will be plenty of opportunities for him to cook. I would be very surprised if he doesn't get at least 28 to 32 minutes a night, which in my opinion should be more than enough playing time for him to at least match his averages from last year. And like many high-end prospects, we should see improvements from year 1 to year 2. But at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to development and efficiency for Scoot. If he can take that next step forward and maybe turn into that 20.8 assists and 1 steal guard, then he might not be a bad player to target once all the high assist guards are gone in your drafts. If you want to mop the floor with every single other fantasy team in your league and annihilate everyone badly every single week, all you have to do is just subscribe. Trust me and do it within the next 3 seconds. I wouldn't risk it. The less obvious tier. Keyonte George, Utah Jazz. George surprised many as a sleeper fantasy rookie last year, averaging 27 minutes a night along with 13 points, 4.4 assists, and nearly 3 rebounds per game. He worked his way into the Jazz starting rotation and actually managed to start in 44 games. In his final 2 months of the season, George improved to averaging 16.3 points and almost 5 assists per game. So heading into this year, I think George has a legit shot to be a big part of the Jazz backcourt and is likely looking to steal major minutes from Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton. With a chance to be a starter on many nights, he has a shot to build on from last year to possibly put up new career highs. Also, if the Utah Jazz does decide to tank later in the season and rest guys like Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson, then George is likely going to be a huge benefactor of seeing an expanded role. If he improves his shooting efficiency and playmaking decisions this season, he could possibly give his owners around 18.6 assists, 1 steal, and 2.5 triples a game, making him a pretty good late round sleeper to draft in most standard leagues. Taylor Hendricks, Utah Jazz. We saw flashes of his potential last season, especially in the final 2 months. Hendricks took full advantage of the Jazz losing season and was gifted a huge bump in minutes for development. He put up a pretty well-rounded stat line, averaging 9 points, 5.8 rebounds, 1.6 triples, and 1.8 combined steals and blocks, and was actually a top 120 fantasy player in most standard leagues during that time. Heading into this season, Hendricks' role on the team is not 100% clear. However, there is a chance that he will be the Utah Jazz starting forward, and we'll see major minutes with starters like Lauri Markkanen and John Collins. If the Jazz decides to keep him on the floor for his shooting efficiency, defensive upside, and blocks, then Hendricks does have a legit shot to shatter his personal career highs. Personally, I would expect some growing pains from Hendricks, especially early on in the season, but he could return to his top 120 form or even flirt with top 100 territory, especially during the most important months of your fantasy season. So if the Utah Jazz are crap again and they decide to tank, then don't be surprised to see them let their younger players like Taylor Hendricks and Cody Williams really begin to eat and pad their stats with inflator started minutes later on. Vince Williams Jr., Memphis Grizzlies. He was actually on his way to a decent breakout season last year before going down to injuries. From year 1 to year 2, we saw massive improvements across many major categories from Williams Jr. He jumped from averaging only 2 points and 7 minutes of playing time a night to 27.6 minutes a game, along with 10 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and almost 1 block and 1 steal per game. He also started in 33 of the 55 games he played last year, and I think we only saw the tip of the iceberg with his gameplay. The Grizzlies seem to be very high on Williams Jr. as they gave him a nice multi-year extension last January. So heading into year 3, Williams Jr. is one of the few players in Memphis who could see an expanded role. And just looking at the Grizzlies depth chart and current roster, I think many would agree that it is only a matter of time before Williams works his way into becoming a full-time starter. And it could be as early as this year, as someone older like Marcus Smart could fall into a backup PG role. And if Williams Jr. manages to secure 30 minutes a night, playing alongside a healthy Ja Morant and Desmond Bane all year, then the well-rounded stats he provided can make him a very relevant player in deeper leagues. Perhaps giving you around 12 to 14 points, 5 rebounds, 1.5 triples, along with 3 assists and 1 steal and 1 block per game. Brandon Podziemski, Golden State Warriors. Somewhat of a fantasy surprise last season, Podziemski is a young Golden State Warriors sleeper to watch out for. Despite limited minutes, his owners enjoyed a solid first year, seeing him average 9.2 points, 5.8 rebounds, and 3.7 assists per game. He also started in 28 games and finished 5th in Rookie of the Year votes. He was somewhat of a fantasy unicorn, as he was one of the few smaller NBA guards who was able to pull in more than 5.5 rebounds a game. Heading into year 2, many expect Podziemski to start alongside Steph Curry or have a very significant role in the Warriors rotation. There were also rumors saying that the Warriors might want him to attempt 8 to 10 triples a game. Assuming that's true, add that to his 38.5 3-point percentage rate, he has a legit shot to set new career highs in points and potentially have a Jordan Poole type of breakout season a few years back. However, his ability to break out is not 100% guaranteed, since the Warriors did bring in another very good shooter in Buddy Hield and also has DeAnthony Melton in the mix. Nonetheless, the Warriors seems to be quite high on Podziemski, so if he does capitalize on his potential usage rate, I could see him average around maybe 14 points along with 6 rebounds and 4 assists, with a shot to be a solid top 100 fantasy player. Trayce Jackson-Davis, Golden State Warriors. A pretty unknown rookie who quietly showed flashes of his potential last year. He appeared in 68 games for the Warriors and averaged 5 rebounds, 1.1 block, and 7.9 points per game in just 16.6 minutes of play. But as a starter for 17 games, we saw his stats go up, averaging 10.7 points, 7.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 1.6 blocks, along with a shooting percentage close to 70% from the field. Overall, very respectable numbers for a second round pick. Heading into this year, there is a lot to like about Jackson-Davis. Roster-wise, he does not have too much competition for his minutes. Perhaps the biggest roadblocks to his massive minutes and a huge breakout season is one, how healthy and available Draymond Green is going to be, and number 2, whether Steve Kerr decides to use a bigger front court to utilize Jackson-Davis' defense, rebounding, and efficiencies around the basket. If Kerr does decide to do that, then Jackson-Davis' fantasy value has potential to really explode. So overall, Jackson-Davis can be a good sleeper to target with a later pick, especially if you're looking for a young big man with breakout potential who can provide decent numbers in field goal percentage, blocks, steals, and rebounds. The least obvious tier. And we're really dumpster diving a little bit here, but at the same time, this is also the place where most leagues are won, especially if you can draft 1 to 2 guys who can significantly outplay their draft position. So stay tuned. Grady Dick, Toronto Raptors. In his rookie season, Dick played 60 games including 17 starts and averaged 8.5 points, 2.2 rebounds, 1.1 assists in 21.1 minutes of play. Overall, pretty unimpressive numbers, which might be a good thing, as he's gonna probably get overlooked in most of your fantasy drafts this year. But heading into this season, it looks like Grady Dick is gonna move into the Raptors starting rotation, taking over the spot Gary Trent Jr. left behind. With a more prominent role and huge bump up in minutes, Grady Dick has to regress pretty bad not to beat out the 8.5 points he averaged last year. Dick was actually a pretty decent shooter, hitting 36.5% of his threes while averaging 4 triple attempts per game. If he can stick in Toronto's starting rotation, then he's likely going to get 3 to 4 more shots per game, so it won't be too hard for him to improve his scoring averages. But do beware that he is not the most well-rounded fantasy player, as his assist, steals, and block numbers could be a lot better. So personally, I think Dick is better for points league than regular category leagues. Now, however, if I wanted to swing big, I would probably use a later flyer pick on him, as he is a pretty young guard with starting minutes and plenty of untapped potential. Vasilije Micic, Charlotte Hornets. Micic came out of nowhere, took full advantage of LaMelo Ball's injuries, and was actually a nice source of assists and a strong deep league impact player for many fantasy owners last year. He had a hot stretch from March to April during the most crucial time of the fantasy season, where he averaged 13.6 points, 6.9 assists, 2.6 rebounds, and 0.9 steals in 32.2 minutes per game. Heading into this year, Micic might be one of those very deep league sleepers worth taking a flyer on, as he might be assigned to backup duties and be a big part of the Hornets' second unit. Although he might have to compete for major minutes with Trey Mann to solidify his backup role. So that's something you might want to keep your eye on, especially throughout the season. But if LaMelo Ball does go down again and miss a whole bunch of games like he does every year, then Micic could be given a very decent amount of minutes and be a strong sleeper who can give you good stats in 4 to 5 major fantasy categories. Dyson Daniels, Atlanta Hawks. Despite very limited playing times to start off his NBA career, we actually saw decent marginal improvements from Daniels from year 1 to year 2. Daniels played just 22.3 minutes per game for the Pelicans last year and averaged 5.8 points along with 3.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 1.4 steals per game. From the very limited playing time and role, he seemed to be really making his opportunities count, and is one of those Swiss Army knife type of fantasy players who can contribute in at least 5 different categories. Daniels joined the Hawks in the DeJounte Murray trade over the summer, and this actually might be the break he needed to finally break out as an NBA player. It looks like he's set to see a larger role in Atlanta. I assume that he will probably come off the bench first and be a key player on their second unit. But with his size and defensive ability, there is a chance that he could be a nice fit to play along Trae Young in a starter role. Overall, it looks like Daniels will get a much bigger opportunity in Atlanta to show the world if he can amount to become a relevant fantasy player. In that, I wouldn't mind using a later flyer pick on him to see exactly what type of upside he has. Amen Thompson, Houston Rockets. Thompson had somewhat of a rocky rookie season. Despite limited playing time at only 22.4 minutes per night, he was actually providing standard league value for many weeks. There were stretches where he was a legit top 75 fantasy player. He finished off his rookie year averaging 9.5 points along with 6.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.6 blocks per game. Scoring might not be his strong suit, but he does provide enough value in other categories like rebounds, steals, and blocks, which makes him more valuable than your average player. Heading into this year, I am a bit concerned about Thompson's playing time though, as he likely has to compete with a lot of young talent in Houston to win playing time. I'm not entirely sure if he can become a full-time starter, but if he can secure around 25 to 26 minutes a night, I think there is enough runway for him to give you around 12 points, 6.8 rebounds, 3 assists, around 1.5 steals, and 0.8 blocks per game with top 100 upside. So using a later pick on him might not be the worst thing in the world. Ausar Thompson, Detroit Pistons. Ausar actually had a better start to his rookie season than his twin brother, but started to lose steam as the season went on. In the end, he finished his rookie year averaging 8.8 points, 6.4 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.1 steal, and 0.9 blocks in 25.1 minutes per game, and was a top 180 player in most standard category leagues. Heading into this season, I like Thompson's situation in Detroit a little more than his brother in Houston, as he might have a shot to be a starter for the Pistons from day one. If so, we can expect bigger minutes and more touches from him this season. Once again, his defensive stats and rebounding shouldn't be a huge problem, and should make him a pretty useful player in most leagues. I might be asking for a lot, but if he does improve his shooting and is able to give you around 12 to 14 points a night along with maybe 1 to 2 triples, then I really think Ausar Thompson could be one of the biggest breakout players and sleepers one could target with a later pick on draft day. Do you agree with everything I said in this video? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to watch more of my crappy videos, then subscribe.